All right, guys, we're just about to get started for our PIM session here, talking about doing PIM in the native API. I'm Paul Bernhardt. You may recognize me if you were here at the camera session an hour ago, 'cause that's where I was. I'm on the developer relations team at Research in Motion, so I help partners write apps for BlackBerry. I come out to events like this, give presentations, stuff like that. If you want to follow me on Twitter, my handle is pbernhardt. So, what is PIM? I think everybody who comes to this session probably knows, but just in case you're, watching this later or you weren't aware, it stands for Personal Information Management. What that means is basically interacting with stuff on the device like events, messages, contacts, notes. It's all in the BB PIM namespace, so it's pretty easy to find. What can you do with PIM? So PIM, we have the standard sort of CRUD paradigm. You can create stuff, you can read stuff, you can update stuff, you can delete stuff. There's also listeners and filters as well, and I'm going to go through a bunch of the API and how you do this stuff. All the APIs for the different aspects like messages, events, contacts, they're very similar, and there's a lot of them, so I'm not going to go in deep on each one. I don't have time for that. I'm going to go in deep on contacts and events. And if you have questions or want to know more about that stuff, we can talk about that later. But there's a lot of stuff to cover, and it's basically all the same. So as long as you sort of understand how to do one, it's pretty easy to do the other stuff. There are also a bunch of cards and pickers from the built-in PIM apps. So just because you want to do PIM stuff, like you want contacts or to deal with events or whatever, you may not actually want to build a whole bunch of stuff into your app, like your own user interface to show how to pick a contact or something like that, because a lot of that stuff is provided by the platform for you. So I'm just going to quickly show you some of the apps that you just got on the device. If we want to switch to, there we go. So you can see, I've loaded a bunch of sample apps already, but you have the Contacts app. It's very easy to just, make a new contact. You can add a whole bunch of different fields. Put in my Twitter account. Stuff like that. You can put in your address. You can also do this add new fields thing. So there's a ton of extra fields you can add. So if I have I don't know, customize ringtones, have a website, something like that, put that stuff in. Oops. So I'll just save that out. And you also have calendar, so you can do things like add a new event. I'm just doing this now just so you can see when I what's this, 18? I don't know. I'm going to say it's 18. I'm just setting this stuff up now so you can see when we go back to actually using the PIM APIs. These are the examples that I actually, oops, I guess I didn't actually make that. These are the examples that I actually made during the session. Whatever. Okay, so. Let's go back. Yeah. So, first thing we're going to do is talk about how you we're going to talk about the Contacts app, the Contacts PIM stuff first. So in order to actually access this PIM stuff, there is a bunch of setup you need to do. First thing you'll want to do is edit your project name.pro file, PRO. You'll have to add this libs line to actually link to the libraries you need. A bunch of the other APIs available right now, you have to do this manual linking. Ideally, people in the sessions are telling you about this stuff. But for PIM, you just add this -lbbpim library. You can just copy and paste that into your profile. If you haven't added any libraries, there won't be this libs thing, this libs line at all, so just copy and paste it in. And a bunch of our samples will show you how to do this too if you're not really sure. You also need to edit your bar descriptor. Now there's a nice little GUI tool. If you open the bar descriptor in the IDE, you just go to the permissions area and you can check off these permissions. But if for some reason you're editing it manually, what they're actually called is the access PIM domain permission. So there's one for calendar, contact, messages, notebooks. You have to actually specify this or you won't be able to access this data. Because I mean, this is sensitive data for the user. They don't want just any app to have access to it. So you put this in your bar descriptor, and then when your app launches or installed, or when your app launches for the first time, you'll see the little permissions dialog, and the user can see, okay, it's trying to access, my contact information. And they can be like, well, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. I'll click OK, or like, why is this game all of a sudden accessing all my contact information? Nope, denied. So you have to put that in there. Most of the PIM APIs, they all have a service. So for example, contacts has the contact service. And this will be the main object that you'll be interacting with to get and set data from the specific service you're looking at, contacts, address book, whatever. You only need one for your application, so you can just create it when your application gets created. So create. The contact service uses the builder paradigm. So you can see, because I went through the contact demo, there's all these attributes that you may or may not have for a contact, whether it has a web page or a Twitter handle or an address or email address or how many phone numbers, stuff like that. So it uses this builder attribute, or the builder paradigm to make this stuff. So you take you create a builder, then you set kind, and if you haven't used builders before, you get a builder object back from this, so you can just keep calling new stuff onto it. So you got to set the kind for the attribute, then the subkind, and then what the actual value is. Maybe you're going to add a whole bunch at once because you're creating a new contact, and then use contact service, create contact, put in your builder, and this parameter here, this is whether you are you're creating a work or a personal contact. This has to do with BlackBerry Balance. I'll talk a bit more about BlackBerry Balance towards the end of the session, so don't worry about that for now. But when you create a contact, it can be either work or personal. Quick aside, there are a lot of kinds that an attribute can be, and a lot of subkinds. There is this const header file that shows you all the different kinds. So you basically take a kind like phone and pair it with some subkind like home or work. Obviously, all the combinations don't necessarily make sense, and right now you can't create your own any of these, so it has to be one of the existing ones that you can put in information into. But check out the contact const to see all the options available. Reading. So once you've created something, this is how you read it. You go and get your contact service and retrieve the contact with the contact details. So you have a contact ID that you've figured out somehow. Maybe you've got a list of them, or you've created it already, something like that. And you take this contact and get whatever you want, first name, or you can get the birthday, a bunch of different kinds. So for some of the complicated ones, like the birthday, you might end up having multiple different subkinds for it. So you get a queue list when you ask for that attribute, and then you have to go through each one and see if it's the subkind you're looking for. And then if it is, do whatever you want with it. In this case, we're getting the value of the date. So update is, so you have your list of attributes. You have your attributes, and you're going through the attributes, and there isn't like an actual update method when you're dealing with the attributes, because they're kind of complicated. It's not always clear what you're doing. So you basically want to go through and delete the attributes that you're, okay. So you have to take your attribute. You go through the subkinds of the attribute till you find the one you're trying to update, and then you If it matches, you delete that attribute. Then you have to basically add the stuff back. So you go do an add again, basically. It's builder, add attribute, set the kind, set the subkind, set the value. So you can't, if you just try and add one that already exists, you haven't deleted it already, you'll get into trouble. So delete it first. Deleting an entire contact, super easy. You just take the service, delete contact, pass in the contact ID. Very simple. Listeners. So listeners let you listen for when something changes on the device. So you can set up a listener for when the contact's added, when it's changed, when it's deleted. It's just the standard signals and slots paradigm from Qt. Connect to those listeners, and then do whatever you want. In this case, I guess I don't actually show you. Well, you can do whatever you want. You get a list of the IDs of the contacts that were changed. So from there, you can display them or filter them. And how you filter stuff is there's a search contacts method on the contacts service. And you basically just supply it with a filter. And you've created, this filter is just, it's a filter, and you've set the search value. The search value is a string of some sort. So you're looking for everyone whose everyone's name's Paul or something like that, has that in the contact somewhere. You just set that to be the search value and then search the contacts on that filter, and you will get a list back of all the contacts. Yeah. All right, so I thought I had slides that said demo now. So I think they may have gotten pulled out. So I am going to just show you 2 demos if you want to switch back to the phone. Okay, so this is a little address book sample. This uses the API we were just talking about. You can see this isn't the actual contact app. This is just a little custom one. It has my contact details. You can see if I go, it's using the listeners, so if I go back to the contacts app and I change this, say I put in my actual last name. Save that out. And we go back here, and look, it just updated. So that's using the listeners. The other thing we can do is use this contact picker that I'm going to walk you through in a minute. So, I mean, you could see the example I just showed off. This is really like re-implementing the address book. You don't ever really want to do this. I mean, we have all the APIs are there to basically build one, but if you find that that's what you're actually doing, you're probably not taking advantage of stuff that's already built into the platform, like the contact picker and stuff like that. So we have this picker, and what it does is you just open the picker, and it slides in the little contact card. I don't know why, looks like a bug there that shows 2 of them. You click on whatever contact you want, and then you get the ID back. So remember, that's where, when you were selecting a contact, this is how you would actually get that ID. You would open up the contact picker, let the user select whatever contact you wanted, or they wanted, and then you get the ID back, and that's how you would get this contact, and then maybe you're looking for their Facebook handle or something like that. That's how you get the contact ID. All right, so let's go back to the slides. This is how you actually build this picker. You have to add a little bit more to your project.profile. You have to add this lib cascades pickers library. There's a bunch of different pickers. Contact's one of them. I think you can do, there's a file picker. I think there's a location picker. There might be another one. I don't recall. When you're editing your QML file, you're going to have to, you have to expose it to the QML file first. So somewhere up in the main class, the main method, or the main class you have. So say we have an app called contact picker test. This is just like the default constructor that gets built for you. You'll include this BB cascades picker, contact picker class. And then before the QML document gets created, so basically this can be the first line inside the constructor for your application, you do this QML register type, put in the contact picker type, and then the actual way the library is referred to in QML. So in this case, it'll be BB contacts pickers. It's version 1.0, and it's going to be called contact picker. This is actually something you can do if you're making your own custom QML components as well. If you build something in C and you import it, and then you can add it to QML like this, so you can use it inside your own application. Inside QML, at the top, just make sure you're actually importing the BB Cascades Picker 1.0 that we just put in there, as well as the regular BB Cascades thing. If you forget to do any of these steps, you'll end up with weird errors that can be difficult to debug unless you remember you actually have to add this stuff. I mean, it's not like it's an unhelpful message. It's just like, if you forget this is a step that has to happen, you'll be like, well, obviously I imported this at this level, but I forgot to import it at this other level. So anyway, this is what the app I showed you did. So we have a button that when you, on the onClicked method, it opens the contact picker. And the contact picker, it's just an attached object, so it's not, it's not on the screen until you've actually, until it gets opened. So until this open method fires, it's just this invisible thing that doesn't do anything. So you attach it to something. Maybe it's a button, maybe it's, someone touches a screen, maybe there's some event that fires in your application that means you have to pick a contact. But you pick it, and then you get this on contact selected signal back, and that is your contact ID. So from there, do whatever you wanted to do with it. Okay, so, yep.
Can you filter the contact picker, or giving your only contact email? Or?
Can you filter the contact picker? I think you can in QML. I believe you can. Question?
What is the lifetime of IDs, and if you want to be able to uniquely track the contact beyond the life cycle of that API stack or of your application, is there some sort of unique way of identifying a particular contact object?
Yeah, so the question was, what's the life cycle of the IDs? How long do they last? And this is the actual unique ID associated with the contact. It's always going to be the same ID when you query it. It just happened to be one because that was the only contact on the device.
So if I pulled in all the contacts from the address book, persisted all those IDs with some of my app's own metadata, and then closed the app, restarted it a week later, I could just pull the list again, do a comparison, and I would know exactly what changed.
Yeah, so if you saved everything, I'm just repeating it because this is getting recorded. So if you saved everything and persisted it out and compared it later, the IDs, if anything's different, it would mean something like the contact was deleted or something like that. So it should all still be the same unless the user's done something.
So if they delete and recreate the contact, say ID 1 will never get reused?
I don't think the ID would get reused if you create and if you recreate it. I'm not entirely sure, actually. We could find out right now if you really want to know. Let's just open up the contacts. We will.
I know on like the JoinNow PIM API, there's some extra UID field that you have that you can, I guess, theoretically use for that.
There are a bunch of hidden fields that don't get populated. I imagine it's not going to get reused, but let's find out. So this should be contact number 2, contact picker, pick number 2, number 2. So it doesn't get reused. Problem solved. All right, let's go back. So we walked through the contact stuff. Yep, another question?
So obviously this goes across applications, so there must be some sort of a shared backend. Is this, what's the mechanism there? Is it a database or some sort of service process, or how's that done?
So it's all gets stored by like the PIM API. The only way for you to really interact with it is either through the PIM API or through the pickers, but it's all like the address book knows, or the contact book knows what all the IDs are. It's only stored one place.
Sure, I'm just wondering about the implementation of that. So is there a service running, or is there a database that gets queried every time, or do you have to know that?
It's not really something the developer needs to worry about. It just gets handled behind the scenes. I think there is like a service running, there's some like REST calls that go back and forth, but it's transparent to the developer. It's not something you need to worry about if you're just playing around with the PIM API.
Well, I am worried about the performance side of it, because that doesn't look like it would necessarily scale. I mean, just lists of all contacts. If I hook that up to an LDAP.
I haven't tried it with a huge number of contacts or anything like that, so I'm not entirely sure, but yeah. All right, so we talked about the contact stuff. Now I'm going to walk through how to do calendar stuff. It's a little bit different, but still basically the same. The big thing is the calendar doesn't use builders, because there isn't a huge number of parameters for a calendar event. You only have a couple things, like what account it is, the folder it's going in, subject, location, stuff like that. Yeah, so basically you just create it, put in whatever details you want to, and then use this calendar service create event. Very similar to contact, just happens to be not using builders. So you may have noticed that this little set account thing, what's an account? Well, as an aside, there are a bunch of different kinds of accounts on the device. So you can see with the account service what kind of accounts are available. So you might have multiple calendars on the device. You can also create your own. You just basically give it a provider. I don't think you can make your own provider. So you can make local calendars and local address books and stuff like that. So you're the one that's using your app to put stuff in and take stuff out. But you can create your own. So it's just a little quick aside. If you don't want to use the built-in ones, keep stuff a little separate. Update is very similar, except you don't have to, again, since it's not that weird builder thing, you don't have to delete a specific attribute before you re-add it. You just get your calendar event, you set whatever you wanted to set, and then you update the event, call the update event method. So calendar doesn't have a little Cascades picker control. It has a whole bunch of invocation targets. So I'm going to actually go into a bit of detail about how to invoke all these cards. If you want more details about how invocation works in general, I very highly recommend you go to Jam 20. That's the invocation session, and they're going to go in deep about how to invoke everything, how to do all sorts of custom stuff. Really highly recommended. Anyway, the setup, you need to add a couple more libraries to your project.pro file. So you need to add libbbsystem, lscreen, and lbbdata. Then you're going to create an instance of an invocation manager. You only need one for your application. You may want to hook it up to the child card done signal. It depends what you're actually doing with it. But this is basically when the card is done, you may get some data back, depending on what you're actually invoking. So event picker card. Yeah, let's go show this demo off on the device. Where did I put you? Calendar invoker. All right. So there's a couple different invokers I'm going to show off. The first is just picking an event. So I made this event earlier in the session. You can see this is the actual card from the calendar, but I'm still inside my application. There isn't another instance of the calendar running, but it does look exactly like calendar application because it's the card it's provided for you to use. So I picked this one. And I've done a little bit of work with the onChild card done method to actually open this up and let you see it in another card. So that's what it looks like. This is what I set it up before. Let's switch back to the laptop. Yeah. So to do it, you want to set the target to be the system.pim.calendar.viewer.nav. The action is bb.calendar.pick, and the MIME type is just going to be text/calendar. And once you set up your invoke request, all you do is use the invoke manager and invoke your invoke request. Once everything's done, you will get this on child card done event. So for this one specifically, what you actually get back is as an iCalendar stream of text, basically. So this one is really for, this card's basically for picking an event and then writing it out to a file, the results out, so you can attach it to like, an email or send it to something else that will understand an iCalendar file. If you want to actually pick it and then display it in your app, you can use this little block of code to interpret it for you. So we assume we're using the default calendar account. We know we have some iCalendar bytes, and it's an iCalendar. So we create a new invoke request, set the target to be this viewer here, system, PIM, calendar, viewer, ICS, open, text calendar. But the data is this data that we've encoded with this little handy function, bb pps object encode. So it's just a little method that turns the data into the format needed by the viewer so it understands it, or the card so it understands it, and then do another invoke request. You may notice a problem here in that you are actually, since we're using the same invoke manager, you're going to get this child card done thing back again, and you may end up in a weird infinite loop, which is bad news. So you probably want to actually check to see the data you're getting back. There is supposed to be a little response type that tells you what kind of data you're getting back. It's not actually being used by the calendar you have right now, so I'd recommend just checking to see if the message is blank for now, but eventually you should be able to check to see what kind of data you're actually getting back. Event creation card. So this is how you actually let the user create an event without having to build your own calendar UI just to put in all these fields. So maybe you're making like a custom event. You can pre-populate a bunch of the fields. You can actually do participants. So have a whole bunch of people coming to this event. You can put in their email addresses, give it a subject, and then you'll set the target to be system, PIM, calendar, viewer, event create. Set the action to be bb action create. MIME type text calendar, same thing. And then similar to how we did in the last slide, we'll use this PPS object encode to encode the data into a format that the card can understand, and then request. So this looks like, if we switch back to the phone, if I click the compose event, you can see I've populated, I put in test before. Did I put in participants? Yep, so I put in 2 participants that got added, and I can, change stuff if I want to, and eventually save it out. Well, I actually didn't. Yeah.
Small question.
Yep.
Can the calendar handle the context of the context app?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure if you can. I think it will look them up, but I don't know. I don't know if I put in. Yeah, maybe. I'd have to get back to you on that one. But if we go back to pick event, we can see this new event that I just created and click on it. And now we could view it, see all the people that are in here. That may look up the calendar or the contact, I don't know. Yep.
Can you use the card without actually creating the calendar object in the database?
Just to
the calendar object for your own application?
so the question was, can you use the card without creating the calendar event. So like what are you trying to do?
Yeah, I'm using my own API to create a calendar on the server,
Mm-hmm.
and I would like to avoid writing my own UI for that.
I mean, you could create it and delete it right after you get the event back. I mean, this compose thing doesn't actually create anything until the user hits save. But I mean, obviously, you don't get to control whether the user hits save or not. So I would probably just either create it or delete it, or use that iCalendar viewer thing if you want to convert it into that format. Okay, back to the slides. So a little aside on JoinNow. So the calendar app has this little JoinNow feature built into it. It'll try and find like conference bridges and stuff in a calendar event. So it does a bunch of work to, parse whatever it can get. It supports a lot of major bridge software. But if, for example, you're creating an event that has a bridge and you want to make it easy for the device to understand it, you basically want to use this simple little format here. You have the address and then the X, meaning it's an extension, put in whatever access code, and then pound to get to the next part. It also understands this format pretty well. If you have specifically call out the access code and moderator code, as long as they're close together, it will probably pick it up. But it also detects US and UK style phone numbers. So just so if you are making this a bridge thing, try and make it easy, but it will detect it for you. So the JoinNow basically lets, when the event pops up, the user will see a little like JoinNow button, so they can just click it and it'll automatically dial them into the meeting, so they don't have to type in any numbers themselves. So this is the viewer card if you want to just view an existing event that you know of. So you have gotten the event ID somehow, and you are specifying what you want to view. So you want to specify the account ID. Yeah, the type is going to be event, obviously. Event ID, but you also want to specify the start time, because in a calendar, you can have a recurring event. So you need to be able to specify which one you're actually talking about. So the easiest way to do that is with the time. So you'll set the target to be system, PIM, calendar, viewer, ICS, action, open, MIME type calendar, and then encode the data that you've basically set up here. You'll notice this is very similar to what we did for the example previously, and it will invoke the card. So I'll show you the demo. I didn't actually populate it the right way, so you can see I didn't actually create the event that I was going to invoke, so you get this little error, but you presumably would actually have an event you're trying to invoke when you're doing that. Yep. Okay. Back to the calendar, BlackBerry Hub. So BlackBerry Hub, you saw during the keynote, is, it's really neat. It lets you, users want to have all their stuff inside the hub, so they don't have to go jumping around. You may have noticed, if you've upgraded your device, you don't actually have the BlackBerry Hub on the device. It's just got this little placeholder image. So the way you, as a developer, get into this hub is using the notification framework. So you want to create a notification, and then you can flash the LED. You can control whether a sound plays, whether you can play a specific sound for the notification. You probably want to not do that. The user can configure any notifications inside the little system settings thing. So if they decide your application deserves a sound and a vibrate, they can customize that. I'd really only recommend customizing a sound if it's like a really rare thing that happens. You have some sort of specific sound that really makes sense. But generally let the user pick it. You can also add an entry to the BlackBerry Hub. You will get, you can specify the title and the body text of this entry. The user will see it. They'll see a little alert icon, and they can tap on it, and it will get removed from the hub, and you can use the invocation framework so it invokes your app with some data, whatever you've put into the notification. So this is something, this is how you do it. With the BB platform notification class, create a new notification, set the title being whatever you want, title, set the body, then you fire this notify event, and that actually starts the notification. That's in the wrong order. You want to set the invoke request before you fire notify, or that may not work correctly. But the invocation request, that's something that you will have created because you went to the invocation session at Jam 20, and they will tell you how to set that stuff up. The push session that's going on right now explains how to do push. I mean, the notification framework doesn't necessarily give you a lot unless you're also using it with push to get stuff from the server, get new data. So you will probably want to be using push with the notification framework, but you can watch it after the show since you very correctly decided to see my session instead of watching stupid Garrett talk. So this is just very basics. You can see more about how to do push and notification stuff in the push session and invocation stuff in the invocation session, which is still happening later today. And I will show you a quick demo of that. This is what you will actually see on the build you have, just so you don't think it's broken, because this app just fires a notification right away. You can see, if you look, that the LED is flashing, but if we do the little peek gesture, there's nothing there. That's because the hub is not there. Normally, on an actual device with BlackBerry Hub installed, you will see an icon there, but just so you don't think it's broken, this is what you're going to see now. And obviously, since BlackBerry Hub's just not actually available, nothing's going to be there. But it will look very similar to the stuff you saw, in the keynote with the little. You also, since there's no hub, there's no way to dismiss the alert. You'll notice this is just firing constantly. You can programmatically dismiss the alert in your app, so just kill the notification there, and it goes away.
Small question.
Yep.
If the notifications as the items are quite large, there will not be so many that can fit in.
Yeah.
What's the approach from building how much?
So the question was, since there's no icons can be big, what's going to happen if there's a whole bunch of them? So that's actually the reason that right now the only way you can interact with the hub is with the notification framework. You actually, every app that's using the notification framework will be pooled into the same icon. So there'll be like a little bell icon, and you can see like, oh, there's one thing using the notification framework. So you can't actually customize the icon right now, and one of the reasons is we want to make sure that it's done properly. Obviously, that's something people want to use and want.
It's good that we miss Christmas this year.
Yeah, so you can't customize the icon right now, but it's definitely something that we want to be able to let you do. We just want to be able to get these things sorted out so it's done properly. Yep.
This might be a little off topic, but it's vaguely related. It looked like the hub was also showing essentially a unified inbox. How would that be handled?
So you may have heard us say unified inbox before, or universal inbox.
Just using the term because that's the closest familiar thing I can.
Yeah, so we've basically renamed it. It's called BlackBerry Hub. So anytime someone said unified or universal inbox, it's now BlackBerry Hub.
It's like a message list.
Yeah, it's a message list, yeah, basically.
And would that, how would that hook work with all this? Say you have 5 things of interest in your app, so you create a notification icon that has a little 5
So the question was, how do you get your stuff in the hub? When you set the title and the body, that's what puts it inside the BlackBerry Hub. So if the user goes to the hub, they'll see your title, they'll see your body, and it'll be put in, interspersed with, the other stuff on in the hub.
It's basically just showing full text notifications and not, say, like a message folder list like on the current phones.
Not sure what you mean.
Well, you can add stuff to the message to the inbox on the current phones without it being a notification. It's just sort of a central shortcut for interesting info that can go straight to your app.
So it is, you can do that on the Java stuff, but it is still basically a notification. You just had to do a whole bunch of stuff to make it a notification, right? Like you still had.
But no, it isn't because it outlives the blinky thing at the top of the screen.
Yeah, and
It can be put on independently on that.
yes, but really if you put something new in the hub, it should fire the LED. And it didn't before. There was just a lot, you had to do a whole bunch of work to make it happen when really it's all the same thing. If you put something in the hub, it should fire an LED because it should be a new notification. It goes in the hub when it's new. That's kind of the paradigm for it. So
So you're not treating the hub as a replacement for, your mail inbox.
it is. This is another limitation of the notification framework in that as soon as you open something, it does get removed from the hub. That doesn't happen to like email and stuff like that. And eventually, if you get more control over the hub, you'll be able to keep your stuff in there. But just for the notification framework, it gets removed right away. So that's just a limitation of that paradigm.
Okay, would keeping some in there longer term be a different API that exists elsewhere or doesn't exist yet?
It doesn't exist yet. Yeah. You also can play around with messages themselves. I'm not really going to talk about that, but you can like create and read and update emails and listen for new emails coming in and do some sort of processing, what have you.
So, a bit about the calendar and also a bit about contacts. They are associated with certain accounts you have, of course. So if I want to plan a new event and I want to ensure that I'm not planning it over something that's already existing, can I pull all the events in one go, or do I have to go by account?
Yeah, so you can figure out what accounts, what calendars there are on the device and look through them all and see if you collide with any of the calendars.
Pull them all in at once?
No, I think you have to specify which calendar you're pulling the data out of when you're asking for it. Any other questions? All right, go back to the slides. Okay, so we're going to talk a little about BlackBerry Balance because this does very much affect people using the PIM APIs. BlackBerry Balance, if you're not really aware of what it does, it basically lets a user have a device that has a personal part of the device and a corporate part of the device. And the corporate part is controlled by the corporate administrator. They can set policies on it. They can control what apps are installed in this perimeter, what apps have access to the data. So it very nicely solves the problem of having a phone that you can use personally and do whatever you want with, but also connect to like your work email and stuff like that, because that's a big problem. And it separates the data very nicely. So you don't have to worry about your user installing some random game that actually has some privacy violating stuff that uploads your contacts to, or uploads all your emails to some scary server. The apps that get installed in the corporate perimeter are only things that the administrator has explicitly allowed and either forced or let the user download. So yeah, this is the kind of experience the user has. You saw what it actually looks like on the device during the keynote. But you have this little work perimeter that has corporate apps installed there. It has the browser. It has the corporate version of App World. You can have different apps like Salesforce or whatever. Personal perimeter has basically whatever the user wanted to put on their device. And they don't really interact. So personal perimeter has its own application space, its own shared data. Corporate perimeter has its own stuff as well. So you can't just read files that have been written out between the two. Basically, you can't really interact between the two at all. Yeah, and this is just, user can install optional applications and mandatory applications. So the corporation will have their own little enterprise app world. So if you're writing an application that makes sense in like an enterprise context, then you want to be targeting like that company to get your application on that device. You don't just put it up on the regular app world. You talk to that company to sell your application to them for whatever licensing agreement makes sense. How this interacts with PIM, work contacts are a little bit different. So work contacts can be accessed from the personal perimeter, unless this is disabled by IT policy, which can happen, but by default, a work contact can be accessed from the personal perimeter. The main reason is because otherwise it gets weird and awkward with the same contact in multiple contact lists. Contact's not usually really very secret, like an email address and a phone number. It's like, that's usually like public contact information. So it can be disabled, but by default it's not, and that's what that little parameter I showed you way back at the beginning when we created a contact was, whether this contact being created should go in the work or the personal perimeter. Other stuff is totally separate. So emails, you can access personal emails from the personal perimeter, but you can't access the work emails. Work emails can be accessed from the work perimeter, but not the personal emails. Same with the other things like notes and events. Yeah, so that's basically what I had. We are having a roundtable for this session at 12 in the exhibit hall. If you want to join me there and talk some more, feel free to tweet about this stuff, BB Jam. The session was Jam 18. Yeah, if you haven't grabbed the conference guide, please do. And please go do the give your reasons to believe at the booth in the Jam space. We'd really appreciate that if you have any cool stuff to say. So thank you very much. I hope that was informative. Again, Paul Bernhardt. You can follow me on Twitter if you like. And that's all I had to say.